On the far side of the city, in a place called the Grand Bazaar, crowds of people from many planets moved between shops and carts. It was busy and loud. Tall buildings stood over the market, and the smells of food mixed with the sound of machines and voices from all over the galaxy. Today, the sun was hidden behind thick clouds, and a gentle wind pushed dust along the metal ground. Traders shouted their prices. Kids laughed and ran between the stalls. In the middle of it all, an alien mother named Ilara held her small daughter's hand and looked around for something to buy. Her daughter's name was Lyri. She was small, with pale blue skin and big round eyes. Ilara loved her more than anything. Ilara was careful in the crowd. She had heard stories about the trash units in the market, the big machines that ate up waste and old metal. People said those places were dangerous, that only fools went near them. But Lyri was curious. She liked to look at everything and touch every bright or shiny thing she saw. Ilara tried to watch her, but the crowd kept pushing them along, making it hard to stay together. Suddenly, Ilara felt her daughter's hand slip away. She turned quickly, her heart pounding, but Lyri was gone. Ilara shouted her name, but the noise in the market swallowed her voice. She ran in one direction, pushing past a group of traders, but she could not see her daughter anywhere. Fear started to grow inside her, sharp and cold. After a few seconds, a voice shouted from nearby. Someone pointed to a small alley behind a pile of broken machines. Ilara hurried over, her feet slipping on the dirty ground. In the alley, she saw a large trash disposal unit, its metal door half open. Her heart nearly stopped. These machines were always hungry, always crushing and grinding everything inside. She rushed closer and looked inside, her hands shaking. From deep inside the trash unit, she heard a small cry. It was Lyri. The sound was weak, but it was enough. Ilara shouted for help, hoping someone would come. She tried to reach into the unit, but the opening was too small for her to fit. She tried to pull away some of the trash, but the heavy metal pieces would not move. Panic was growing. She called again, louder this time. Some aliens came closer to see what was happening. Most of them stayed back, afraid of the dangerous machine. One older trader said there was nothing they could do. He said anyone who went inside would be crushed. A group of shoppers shook their heads. Nobody wanted to go near the trash unit. A few people even said it was already too late. They said the trash units were fast, that the child would be lost before anyone could help. Ilara fell to her knees in front of the trash unit. She began to cry, tears running down her face. She kept calling her daughter's name, hoping she would hear something, anything. For a moment, it seemed like the world had stopped moving. The only thing that mattered was the small, scared voice calling out from the darkness. That was when a human visitor named Chris noticed the crowd. He was new to this part of the city. He had come from Earth only a few months before, looking for work and adventure. Chris was tall and strong, with short brown hair and calm eyes. He wore simple clothes and carried a small bag. When he saw the crowd, he moved closer to see what was wrong. Chris listened as Ilara begged for help. He asked someone in the crowd what had happened, and the aliens explained. They told him a little girl had fallen into the trash unit. They said it was useless to try and save her, that the machine was too dangerous and that nobody would survive inside. Chris looked at the machine and then at Ilara, who was still crying. He saw the fear on her face and the helplessness of the people around her. Something inside him would not let him walk away. He stepped forward, surprising everyone. He asked Ilara if her daughter was still alive. Ilara nodded, tears streaming down her face. She pointed at the unit and said she could still hear Lyri crying. The crowd tried to warn Chris, telling him that it was too late, that the machine would start again soon. They said he would be crushed if he went inside. But Chris did not listen. He said he had to try. He told Ilara that he would do everything he could to save her child. He looked at the trash unit and studied the door. He could see bits of old machines, sharp metal pieces, and broken glass. The smell was terrible, but he did not care. He took a deep breath and pushed his way to the front of the crowd. His hands shook a little, but he was not afraid for himself. He was only thinking about the little girl inside. The other aliens watched him closely. They had never seen a human act like this before. Most of them thought he was foolish or maybe even crazy, but some of them felt a small spark of hope as they watched him prepare to go inside. Ilara held Chris's arm. She begged him not to risk his life, but Chris gently took her hand and promised he would do his best. He told her to keep calling her daughter's name so the girl would not feel alone. Then he turned back to the trash unit. The opening was small, but Chris squeezed inside, using his arms to pull himself through the mess. Sharp metal scratched his skin, and the smell was even worse inside. It was dark and hot, and he could hear the sound of the machine humming, waiting to start its next cycle. He tried not to think about what would happen if he did not move fast enough. As Chris crawled deeper into the trash, he listened for the sound of the little girl. He heard her crying, somewhere close, her voice shaking with fear. He called out to her, telling her to hold on, that he was coming to help. Outside, Ilara watched the trash unit with wide, terrified eyes. She could not see Chris anymore. The crowd was silent, waiting and hoping. Time seemed to slow down, and every second felt like an hour. Ilara kept calling her daughter's name, praying that Chris would find her in time. Deep inside the trash unit, Chris kept moving forward, ignoring the pain in his arms and legs. He was not going to give up, no matter what happened next. Inside the trash unit, Chris kept crawling forward through the narrow, messy space. Sharp pieces of broken metal scraped his hands, but he did not stop. He called out softly, "Leary, can you hear me?" The only answer was a small whimper from somewhere ahead. It was enough to make him move faster. The air was thick with the smell of oil and garbage. Every movement made a loud crunch. He felt sweat on his forehead. He blinked, trying to see in the darkness. Behind him, the opening where he had entered was almost hidden by the trash. He knew he had to hurry. The machine could start at any moment. He did not know how long he had. Every second he feared that the loud grinding would begin and the walls would close in. Still, he pushed ahead, clearing a path with his arms. Outside, Ilara's voice kept calling her daughter's name. The sound was faint but clear enough for Chris to follow. It also helped Leary, who was afraid and alone. She cried out again, little louder, and Chris called back, "I'm coming, just hold on." He used his strength to push aside a heavy piece of metal that blocked his way. His arms hurt, and his shirt was already torn in several places. But he did not care. As he crawled, he found more obstacles: broken pipes, twisted wires, and parts of old machines. Some pieces were sharp, and he felt them cutting his skin. Blood made his hands slippery, but he only wiped them on his pants and kept going. He thought of the little girl, scared and trapped, and that gave him the courage to move forward. He did not want to let Ilara down. He remembered the look in her eyes when she begged him for help. At last, Chris saw a small blue shape in the darkness. Leary was curled up, pressed between two large metal panels. She was crying quietly, her face covered in dust and her clothes torn. She did not see Chris at first, so he spoke in a gentle voice. "Leary, it's me, Chris. I'm here to help you." She looked up, her big eyes shining with tears. She tried to reach out, but the space was too tight. Chris reached for her, but one of the metal panels was heavy and would not move. He pulled with all his strength, feeling his muscles shake. The panel did not move at first, but he did not give up. He tried again, using both hands. Finally, the panel slid to the side a little, making just enough space for him to pull Leary out. She cried out in pain as she moved, but he held her close, telling her it was going to be all right. Leary hugged Chris tightly, shaking with fear. She buried her face in his shoulder and held on as if she never wanted to let go. Chris spoke softly. "I've got you, Leary. We're going to get out of here." He checked her arms and legs for injuries. She had some cuts, but nothing seemed broken. Chris felt relief, but he knew they were not safe yet. Outside, Ilara was still calling, her voice growing weaker from fear and worry. The crowd had grown larger. Some aliens watched with wide eyes, unable to believe that a human would risk his life for someone he did not know. Others whispered that the machine could start at any moment. A few even turned away, not wanting to see what might happen next. Suddenly a loud alarm rang out. Red lights flashed on the side of the trash unit. The machine was about to start its crushing cycle. Ilara screamed and tried to run to the door, but strong arms held her back. she cried, begging someone to help, but nobody moved. Everyone was afraid. Inside, Chris heard the alarm and saw the red lights flashing through the cracks in the metal walls. He knew they had only seconds left. He picked Leary up in his arms and turned around, searching for a way out. The path he had used was almost closed by shifting trash. Sharp metal and broken plastic blocked the way, but Chris did not stop. He told Leary to close her eyes and hold on tight. With one arm around her, he used his other hand to pull and push at the trash, making a small tunnel. His arms burned with pain, but he kept moving, fighting for every inch. Leary was shaking, but she did not cry anymore. She trusted Chris to get her out. The alarm grew louder, and the walls of the machine started to shake. Chris could feel the floor moving beneath him as the crushing cycle began. He shouted for help, hoping someone outside would hear him and open the door. He was almost out of breath, but he did not give up. Finally, he saw a bit of light through the trash, a sign that the door was still open a little. He pushed harder, using his shoulder to force the last pile of garbage aside. With a final burst of strength, he pulled Leary through the small gap, falling onto the cold ground outside. He held her close, rolling away from the door just as it slammed shut behind them. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Ilara ran to them, falling to her knees and pulling Leary into her arms. She cried, hugging her daughter as if she would never let go. Leary cried too, but now it was from relief, not fear. Chris lay on the ground, breathing hard, his body covered in cuts and bruises. The crowd was silent at first, shocked by what they had seen. Nobody spoke. Then, slowly, they began to realize that Chris had done what none of them would dare to do. Whispers spread through the market, and people pointed at him, some with respect, others with wonder. Elara turned to Chris, tears still on her face. She thanked him over and over, her voice shaking. Chris smiled, even though he was tired and hurt. He said he was just glad Leary was safe. Ilara hugged him, and Leary hugged him too. Chris felt a warm feeling in his heart. He knew he had made a difference. As the crowd watched, some began to clap quietly, then louder. Soon the whole market was filled with the sound of applause for Chris, the human who had risked everything for a little girl he did not know. Chris closed his eyes for a moment, feeling both happy and humble. He did not want to be a hero, but he knew that today he had become one in the eyes of many. After the crowd's applause, Ilara held her daughter close. Leary was safe, but her small body still shook from fear and cold. Chris sat on the ground, trying to catch his breath. His arms and legs hurt from the sharp metal inside the trash unit. His shirt was torn, and dirt covered his face. But his eyes were calm, watching the mother and daughter. Elara looked at Chris with deep gratitude. "You saved my baby," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." Chris smiled and said, "No need to thank me. I just did what anyone should do." The aliens around them whispered, surprised by his words. Many had never heard such kindness from a human before. A few of the aliens stepped forward. One of them, a tall man with green skin named Rallo, asked Chris how he had managed to survive inside the trash unit. "That place is deadly," Rallo said. "No one can live inside it," Chris shrugged and said. "I don't know. I just kept moving and didn't give up." His words were simple, but they carried a strength that made the aliens listen carefully. Some members of the crowd began talking about what they had seen. They said no one had ever been brave enough to enter the trash unit before. They said humans were different from the others. Some said humans were reckless, but others saw courage and heart. Ilara smiled and said, "He showed us what it means to care." As the sun began to set, the market grew quieter. Traders packed their goods, and shoppers left to their homes. Ilara and Leary stayed near Chris, who had cleaned his wounds with water from a bottle a nearby vendor gave him. "You need rest," Ilara said, "and food." Chris nodded. He was tired, but he felt happy inside. While they talked, an official came from the city's safety team. Her name was Kira, and she wore a uniform with badges that showed her rank. Kira looked serious as she approached. She asked Chris many questions about what happened inside the trash unit. She wanted to know how he survived, how he found Leary, and if the machine had any problems. Chris answered clearly, telling Kira what he had seen and done. Kira listened, then said she would report to the city leaders. Your actions were brave, she said, but also dangerous. We will study the trash units to make them safer. Chris hoped that no one else would have to risk their life like he did. After Kira left, Ilara invited Chris to her small home nearby. She wanted to thank him properly and let Leary rest in a safe place. Chris accepted the invitation, feeling welcome. As they walked through the narrow streets, Ilara told him about her life. She was a trader who sold spices and cloth from her planet. She had come to this city for a better life. Chris shared a little about himself. He said he came from Earth, a small blue planet far away. He had joined a space crew to explore new worlds. This city was his first stop. Chris said he missed Earth sometimes, but was happy to meet people like Ilara and Leary. The two smiled, feeling a bond growing between them. When they arrived at Ilara's home, it was small but clean. The walls were painted in soft colors, and plants grew in pots near the windows. Leary fell asleep quickly on a small bed. Ilara made tea for Chris and herself. As they sat, Ilara asked, "Why did you risk your life for a stranger?" "Most here would not do that." Chris looked at her and said, "Because it's right. No matter who you are, no one deserves to be left behind." Ilara nodded slowly. She said, "Humans are strange, but maybe that is good. You have a courage that many do not." Chris smiled again. He did not think he was special. He only knew that helping others was important. The next day, news of Chris's bravery spread through the city. Traders talked about the human who had saved a baby from the trash unit. Children told stories about him in the playgrounds. Some leaders of the city invited Chris to speak at meetings about safety and cooperation between humans and aliens. Chris was surprised by the attention. He had only acted on instinct, but he saw how his actions changed minds. Some aliens who had been afraid of humans before now wanted to learn more about them. They saw humans as friends, not strangers. One day, Ilara brought Leary to visit Chris at a nearby market. Leary smiled and hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she said in her small voice. Chris felt warm inside. He knew that his friendship with Ilara and Leary was real and important. Over time, Chris and Ilara worked together to teach people about trust and courage. They told stories about that day in the trash unit. They said that true strength comes from helping others. Even when it is hard, the city began to change. People started to help each other more. The trash units were repaired to be safer. Children were taught to be careful but not afraid. Humans and aliens began to live closer, sharing their skills and stories. Chris looked back on the day he saved Leary and smiled quietly. He knew that one small act could make a big difference. He was proud to be human and proud to have helped a family in need, and so, the story of the human who tore through the trash with bare hands became a symbol of hope and courage in a world full of stars. Days passed since the rescue. The market was busy as usual, but something was different. The aliens and humans who lived in the city began to talk more. They shared stories about Chris, the human who risked everything to save a little girl. The story gave hope to many who felt scared or alone in the big city. Chris spent his days helping Ilara and Leary. He worked with traders to fix the trash units so no one would get trapped again. Sometimes he joined meetings with city leaders and safety teams. He told them how important it was to care for each other, no matter what planet they came from. Ilara and Chris grew closer as friends. Ilara taught Chris about her culture, food, and language. Chris shared stories about Earth, his home. They laughed together and learned from each other. Leary liked having Chris around. She felt safe and happy. One afternoon, while Chris and Ilara were working on a plan to make the trash unit safer, a group of city officials came to see them. Kira, the safety officer, was with them. She said they wanted to thank Chris again and invite him to speak at a big event. The event was about unity between humans and aliens. The city leaders wanted to show that everyone could work together, even if they were different. Chris was nervous, but agreed. He wanted to help build peace and trust. On the day of the event, a large crowd gathered in the city square. Banners with messages of friendship flew in the wind. Chris stood on the stage, looking at the faces before him. Some were aliens, others were humans. All were curious and hopeful. Chris took a deep breath and began to speak. He told the story of Leary and the trash unit. He spoke about fear and courage, and how helping others was the greatest strength. His voice was clear and calm, reaching every ear. When he finished, the crowd cheered. Many felt inspired. Some aliens came forward to shake his hand, thanking him for his bravery and words. Chris smiled, feeling proud but humble. After the event, Chris walked with Alara and Leary through the market. People greeted them warmly. Chris noticed children playing together, humans and aliens alike. He knew the city was changing for the better. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall buildings, Chris sat on a bench watching the stars. Ilara joined him, holding a cup of tea. They talked about the future and dreams. Ilara said she hoped humans and aliens would become good friends. Chris nodded. "We have to keep trying," he said. "Together we can make a better world." Leary ran over, holding a small flower she picked from a nearby garden. She gave it to Chris with a big smile. He took the flower, feeling happy inside. The city was alive with hope. The story of a human who tore through trash with bare hands was no longer just a tale. It was a new beginning for many, a symbol of kindness, courage, and the power to change. And so life went on. Chris, Ilara, and Leary faced each day with friendship and strength, ready to face whatever came next, knowing they were never alone. Weeks went by since Chris saved Leary. The city was different now. People talked more and helped each other more. The trash units were repaired and made safer. Children played freely near the markets. Humans and aliens shared stories and food. Chris worked with Alara every day. They helped traders fix broken machines and clean the streets. Chris was learning the alien language better and better. Ilara taught him new words, and Chris told her about Earth's games and music. They laughed a lot and became close friends. One morning, as Chris walked through the market, he noticed a group of children watching him. They were a mix of humans and aliens. The children were curious and shy, but smiled when Chris waved. He sat with them and told stories about Earth and his adventures. The children listened carefully, eyes wide with wonder. Leary joined the group and played with the children. She laughed and ran, happy to be free and safe. Chris watched her and felt proud. He thought about how one small act had changed many lives. That afternoon, Chris and Alara were called to the city council. The leaders wanted to thank Chris again and offer him a new job. They asked him to help teach people how to work together and stay safe. Chris accepted. He wanted to keep making the city better. Chris began to travel around the city, meeting different groups of aliens and humans. He spoke about kindness and courage. He told the story of Leary and the trash unit, showing how one person could make a big difference. Many listened and started to believe that peace and friendship were possible. Some aliens were still afraid or suspicious of humans, but Chris did not give up. He visited schools and markets, helping people learn to trust. Slowly, the walls between the groups started to fall. One evening, while walking home with Alara and Leary, Chris saw a group of young aliens playing a new game. It was a mix of human and alien rules made by the children themselves. Chris smiled, seeing hope in the next generation. Ilara said, "You helped them, Chris. You showed them the way." Chris looked at the stars and said, "We all did it together." That night, Chris sat by the window thinking about the journey. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he believed in the power of friendship. He was ready to face the future, knowing that one small act of bravery could change the world. Months passed since Chris saved Leary from the trash unit. The city was no longer the same place. Humans and aliens lived closer. They helped each other and shared their lives. The story of Chris's courage had become a symbol of hope for many. Chris continued his work with the city leaders. He helped make safety rules for the markets and trash units. He taught people how to trust and care for one another. Sometimes he visited schools to tell children stories about bravery and friendship. One day, Ilara came to Chris with good news. A group of humans and aliens had started a new market together. They sold foods and goods from many planets. Chris was happy to hear that. It showed that people were ready to work and live as one. Lir grew stronger every day. She loved to explore and play with children from all kinds of worlds. Chris often took her to parks and playgrounds. They laughed and ran under the bright stars, dreaming of adventures. One evening, as Chris walked through the market, he saw a small group of aliens helping an old human woman carry her bags. He smiled. Kindness was spreading like fire. It was no longer just one person's story, but a way of life. The city leaders asked Chris to help build a new center where humans and aliens could meet, learn, and share their cultures. Chris worked hard to make it happen. The center became a place of peace and friendship. Many came there to learn new things and make new friends. Ela and Chris often visited the center. They talked about how far they had come. Ilara said, "We built this together because one human did not give up." Chris nodded and said, "It was not just me, it was all of us." As the stars shone above the city, Chris thought about that day in the trash unit. He smiled quietly. One small act of courage had brought many together. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, friendship and kindness would always light the way. And so, the story of the human who tore through the trash with bare hands became a legend, a reminder that even in a world full of strangers, one person can change everything by choosing to care.